This place is all talk. You can't have fries without ketchup. The ketchup is inside the fries?
There's cream cheese in this pizza bagel. It adds a whole other level of flavor. And with pizza on a bagel, you can eat pizza anytime!
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we seek to elevate the widely beloved but often humble pizza bagel and fries into some inventive cartoon haute cuisine. First thing we gotta do is make bagels, which we did on the previous Steven Universe episode, but I've learned a couple tips and tricks since then. We're starting by making a sponge out of 250 grams of bread flour, 1 teaspoon active dry yeast, and 350 grams of room temperature water, which we're gonna mix into a paste, cover, and let sit at room temperature for at least 4 hours, up to overnight if you really want to develop your bagel's flavor. You should see some big awesome bubbles and a nice webby network of gluten beginning to form. To this we're going to add 25 grams of barley malt syrup, 450 more grams of bread flour, and 10 grams of kosher salt. Affix dough hooks and knead for 10 full minutes. If you want slightly softer, less chewy bagels, better for sandwiches, shoot for more like 4 or 5 minutes. Either way, we should be met with a soft, silky, springy dough that we're going to form into a ball and place back in the bowl, covering and letting proof at room temperature for 1 hour. The dough should poof up a little bit, but not quite double in size. This shows that our yeast is still alive and well, and that our dough is ready for division and shaping. One shortcoming of the Steven Universe bagels is that they were hilariously small, so I'm doubling the size of the portions into pieces that weigh 130 grams, from which we should yield 8 bagel balls, which we're going to cover with a moistened towel and let rest at room temperature for another 30 minutes, just enough time to let our gluten relax so that we can form our balls into bagels without them tearing. You could roll out and twist your bagels New York style, but I like to just punch a hole in the center with my thumbs and widen the whole thing into a bagel using 2 spinning fingers. It's important to make the hole a little bigger than you think that it needs to be. These guys are going to puff up a lot, and like an untended ear piercing, they could close completely if you're not careful. Rinse and repeat with the remaining bagels, and since there's a bunch left, this is a great opportunity to introduce Kendall Beach, our new kitchen producer. After all, it's like I always say, forming bagels is a team sport. Yes, of course I always say that. Why would I make something like that up? After a little Hollywood handshake, we are generously oiling some plastic wrap and using it to cover the bagels, which we're going to fridge for at least 24 hours, ideally up to 72. Plenty of time to begin the equally arduous process of making French fries. But not just any French fries, we're doing a modification of ChefSteps' modification of Heston Blumenthal's justifiably famous triple-cooked chips. First, we are peeling and cutting 1 kilogram of russet potatoes into giant-ass French fries, keeping everybody hanging out in cool water because russets are full of starch, and storing them in the water is not only going to remove some of the starch, it's going to keep the potatoes from discoloring. Next up, we're making a brine in which we're going to cook our potatoes. 1 liter of water, 15 grams of kosher salt, and 10 grams of glucose syrup. If you don't happen to have glucose syrup lying around, you can substitute with 10 grams of granulated sugar. We're also adding 2.5 grams of baking soda, which is going to raise the pH level of the fries and help them brown. Mix everybody together until homogeneous, and then we are very carefully combining half the fries and half the brine in a vac-sealed bag, turning our vac sealer into an arcade game that we have to hit stop on before it sucks water into the mechanism and destroys your day. Alternately, you could just put these in a heat-safe zip-top bag and suck out all the air you can with a straw before sealing and introducing to a 195-degree Fahrenheit sous vide bath. This just below boiling bath is going to gently and evenly cook our potatoes for 20 minutes, during which time they should cook to the point of almost falling apart and becoming very easy to crush betwixt 2 gloved fingers. So now we're going to very carefully drain these guys and adjust focus on our lens so we can examine them up close. They should have a lightly roughed up texture and should be extraordinarily fragile. So now we're going to very carefully lay them out on a wire rack set in a rim baking sheet, making sure that they do not touch, and we're going to place them in the freezer for about 30 minutes, which is going to help drive off excess moisture. Then straight out the freezer, they're going into some peanut oil heated to 260 degrees Fahrenheit for anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes until they are just starting to turn blonde around the edges. Rinse and repeat with the rest of the fries in small batches, both so they don't touch and also so they don't lower the temperature of the frying oil every time you plop them in. Back out of the wire rack and into the freezer they go for at least 2 hours, ideally overnight. A few days later and we're ready to finish what we started. These bagels have been in the fridge for 72 hours, and before they can be baked, they must first be boiled in a combination of a gallon of water, 1 tablespoon Marley malt syrup, and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. Once a boil is reached, straight out the fridge and into the water go our bagels for 20 seconds on each side. Then we're placing them on a lightly greased wire rack set in a rim baking baking sheet and baking in a preheated 425-degree Fahrenheit oven, where they're going to bake for 20 to 25 minutes total. After about 15 minutes, you're going to start seeing some spotty browning on the outside of your bagels. Fear not, we're going to give them a flip and place them back in the oven for another 5 to 10 minutes until they are evenly browned all over. And you're going to see, because of the long ferment in the fridge, we have an absolutely crackling, blistered crust on the outside of our bagels. This is because of the yeast slowly producing CO2 in the cold of the fridge, giving us both an improved flavor and texture. Ow, my fingers. Also, if you want a more pronounced bagel hole, make sure that you give them an extra stretch before they head into the water. Set those aside to cool because it's time to finish up our fries, which we're going to do in a positively decadent medium. About 2 quarts of duck fat heated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Carefully lower in the par-fried potatoes and let them fry for between 2 to 5 minutes until they are deeply, shatteringly golden brown and crisp. The brine, sous vide, freeze, and cook again method has rewarded us with a fry that has a glassy, crisp exterior and an impossibly light and fluffy interior despite the fry's size. Why do we make fries so big? Because, well, it's time to inject them with ketchup, which we're gonna do by virtue of a giant, scary barbecue needle filled with ketchup. Slightly warm ketchup so that we don't cool off the interiors of our fries too much. We're gonna start by inserting the needle the full length of the fry and slowly pull it out, whilst depressing the plunger and impregnating our fries with, this all sounds kind of wrong. I don't know, we're filling the fries with ketchup with a long needle. And then, to Steven Universify our bagel, we're first going to slice it in half, and then perform a ritual that sandwich shops refer to as scooping, or the act of quite literally scooping out the interiors of the bagel to make room for our cream cheese that we're going to pipe into the now vacant cavity of our once bready bagel. Spread it smooth so nobody knows that it's in there when served, and then we're going to top it with a generous layer of a lightly cooked San Marzano tomato sauce, obscuring our schmeary surprise and giving us a platform upon which we can arrange some little pieces of fresh mozzarella cheese. These were kind of scattered around in various dots and X's, so that's what I'm going to emulate here. And because the idea of a cold pizza bagel is the stuff of nightmares, bake at 425 degrees Fahrenheit for 5 to 10 minutes. Then we are topping with a smattering of chopped fresh basil, just enough to give a little flavor and visual variety, and arranging on a plate with a couple fresh basil leaves. Then it's time to start arranging our ketchup-injected French fries in a rarely seen French fry starburst pattern, garnish with a single sprig of fresh parsley, and there you have it, Steven's chefy, more than meets the eye interpretations of the 2 Beach City favorites. First up, the French fries, and to be honest, I thought injecting them with ketchup was going to totally ruin their texture, but it actually worked out pretty well. The inside stayed nice and fluffy, and the outside nice and crisp with a little channel of ketchup running right through the center. The cream cheese pizza bagel was another surprising success. I thought I wasn't going to like it. I am what you might call a pizza bagel purist, but the addition of cream cheese added a kind of brunchy vibe to the bagel and earned it a spot in the Clean Plate Club, which is great because these pizza bagels and these fries took 3 days and almost $100 to make. But even after all that, I found myself craving a real deal pizza bagel. Mini bagels, sauced and cheesed, and broiled with tiny little cubes of pepperoni. You might have seen on Instagram that I'm thinking about starting a bagel truck next year, and these little guys definitely are going on the menu.